All right, so we're just about to get started. He was just playing a piece of music and had a handout that he was just sharing, which is actually
It'll come up on the screen.
It'll come up on the screen as the second slide.
Third slide.
Third slide.
All right. I'm not sure everybody's here because they're worried about the afterlife or what there might be to it. And we're actually going to start with a couple of questions. Maybe. There we go. All right. So this is an open discussion. How would you describe heaven? Now, granted, none of us have ever been there to really explain it, but what in your head has been your image of heaven? What do you think it's going to be? Peace? Okay.
Oh, you should probably repeat things.
I just did.
Yeah, no, that's good. I'm saying that's a good thing.
What else? Come on. You must have some image of what it's going to be like. Is it going to be streets paved with gold and marble halls and all of that, or
freedom from pain and suffering?
Freedom from pain and suffering. I think some people think it's a 9 million hole golf course that you just play golf forever.
Am I going to see people?
Are you? I can't answer that, but that's
I want to see Alpha.
all right. So your vision then is that there will be other people there that you have known in your life and otherwise that you might be able to talk to.
That's a good thought.
Okay. Good thought. All right. Anything else?
Also, as a state of mind, you can feel like you're in heaven now, or you can feel like you're in hell now.
Okay. State of mind, you feel like you're there now or in hell now. And I think as we look around the world, we wonder exactly where we are. Okay, so much of our perception of both heaven and hell is based not so much on biblical terms, but on what artists and writers have visioned it for themselves that then we appropriate for ourselves. We'll see some images later on of what some artists have seen based on their particular theology. So what about hell? If heaven is this peaceful, wonderful place, what's hell like?
The absence of God.
A place nobody wants to go. All right.
It's the Ukraine. Yeah,
the Ukraine.
Funny, but for me, it's Ukraine, right? That's hell right now.
Okay.
Ever since man was kicked out of Eden.
Okay. Ever since man was kicked out of Eden, we've been in hell.
I think we have little glimpses of heaven from time to time. I think Betty was eloquent in what she said, that there maybe it mentally we may feel like we're in hell at times if we're really in a bad place, very unhappy or fearful or in pain. And on the other hand, if we feel like we're in a moment of incredible joy.
It's like heaven on earth.
Like heaven, yeah, kind of. That's what I think. I think we probably, not a lot of people, I fussed, I didn't want to come because I don't want to talk about hell, because I have nightmares anyway, because I'm suggestive. Anyway, but I think people probably focus more on heaven than hell just because it's a bad thing. No one wants to focus on. I mean, if you're in pain and you get out of it, you forget about it. You're like, "Ooh, I'm done with that."
Yeah, I think, our perception of both heaven and hell is based on our individual emotional and physical well-being. It was a year ago yesterday I had my back surgery. And, you know, there were a couple days there I wasn't sure whether I was in heaven or hell by the amount of pain after the surgery. But it's all gone, you know, surgical pain goes away. So, yeah, I don't know that anyone can precisely describe heaven or hell outside of the context of their own life. That sound good? I don't know.
Laura has her hand
What
up.
about anybody online? Laura, did you have any thought you wanted to share? Or Joan? Mary Lou?
Hell is the absence of hope.
Wait a minute, Doris. Just a minute.
Hell is the absence of
Hope.
hope. Absence of hope.
Okay.
Doris?
There was a member of our family, when the family was gathered around and she was on her deathbed. She's supposed to have opened her eyes and said, "Oh, it's so lovely where Daddy is." As if she would have had visions of heaven before she
Okay.
passed over. As they
Right.
say. I like her to think of that. It was everything that she expected it to be. I always think it's nice if a dying person can leave the mourners there with a nice thought. I always thought that was nice that was passed down through the family.
Okay. So what Doris is saying is that individuals she has known who on their deathbed had a vision of something peaceful and bright and wonderful to leave with the mourners behind. All right, let's look at this chart. I passed this chart out. What this is a chart of the major religions of the world, when they started, and some touch points in their historical timeline. And what I want to do is talk about each of them and what their writings have to say about heaven and hell. Okay? You can look all this stuff up if you want to. But I think looking at the timeline, what's really interesting is where Christianity comes in the sequence of time related to other religions. It's really a new faith. So we go back to Hinduism. We have a misconception about Hinduism that it's a religion of many gods. It really is. The god of Hinduism is Brahman, and all the other things that we see are manifestations of that same God. The view of heaven and hell goes back to what's called the Vedic, Vedic literature from 1500 BC in funeral hymns that have come down. And heaven was seen as the realm of the fathers. In so many religions, heaven is the dwelling place of the ancestors. And the importance of faith is to be able to stay in touch in some way with those ancestors. Within Hinduism, Yama, Y-A-M-A, was the first person to die and became the god of the dead. Makes sense? In Hinduism, your personal identity is preserved in the afterlife. And it wasn't until the 3rd century BCE, and it's here on the chart right there, 300 BCE.
It's about the middle of the first
Yeah.
column.
The
203.
Upanishads, I can't even pronounce it, Upanishads, was a 3rd century collection of writings that proposed a cyclical worldview, that heaven and hell are just intermittent stages in the series of earthly existence. We start there getting into a sense of reincarnation that comes down through many of the different faiths. Okay, I know this is going to be quick. Judaism, heaven is the dwelling place of Yahweh, which is God. Earth is the dwelling place of humanity. One of the words that we hear very often in Scripture is Sheol, Sheol. That is not hell. It is the grave. It is the tomb. It became known as the land of shadows. When the Jews went into exile in 597 BC, when they were taken to Babylon, their whole theology began to change because of the influence of the Eastern Persian faiths. Prior to the exile, there was no dead existence. You died, that was it. When they came back from the exile, resurrection and final judgment entered into the picture. And that became accepted in many different Jewish circles. Another word that we see popping up in Scripture is Gehenna, Gehenna, as a place of punishment of the unrighteous. Now, is that a hell? They don't say so. Is that purgatory? They don't say so. For the Jewish faith, living and doing good in this life is the most important thing. They have three doctrines: recompense, immortality, and resurrection. So a lot of Christians have held to the belief that Judaism did not believe in any resurrection, that Jesus brought that into the picture, but in fact, later Judaism did bring in the whole notion of resurrection.
What did you say, the three?
Recompense, immortality, and resurrection. And resurrection is a physical re-examination of life. Now we go into Zoroastrianism, an ancient faith. It's the third column. The righteous are to forever enjoy the presence of God in unending light. The unrighteous are condemned to a tortuous hell. And the god Saoshyant will lead people to raise the dead. After the return to judgment, souls go to heaven or hell to be rewarded or corrected in bodily form. This gets rather mystical in the way it looks at things. What happens in their faith, the body passes through a river of molten metal to emerge for good in eternity. So everybody goes through that. The body and soul within the faith are of equal importance. In the end, heaven and earth combine. Now we think of Jesus and the second coming where everything merges into one. So here we have it in the Zoroastrians. Jainism, a lot of people haven't heard about Jainism.
What
The-
parts of the world are the most
Um,
common in both parts? Do
Sounds
you
like
remember?
Persia.
India, the subcontinent of India. They have three groups of scriptures. The Purvas, which was an ancient oral tradition, they did not believe that anything should be written down, that the oral tradition was held by the priests, and they passed it down from one generation of priests to the next. The problem was that when plagues hit and the priests got wiped out, the oral tradition stopped. So then they started writing things down. So they have what's called the 12 limbed basket, Limbed, limbed basket, which is their version of 12 disciples. Sound familiar? There has been a split in the church over the centuries into two different groups. They believe that every living thing has a soul. The priests will even wear masks over their faces to prevent them from breathing in insects, because then the insects would die. They have brooms to sweep where they are to walk, to push aside any life that might be killed if they stepped on it. They have a
They eat.
vegetable.
Are they entire
That's a living
vegetarian?
thing.
Well,
Not moving around.
Yeah, that's true.
it's not an animal or whatever. They have the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. In the rebirth, there is no physical body, but total awareness and bliss. When a living thing dies, its soul is immediately reincarnated until it reaches this top state of existence. In the world to come, there'll be no eating or drinking, no sex, no business, no envy, no hatred, no rivalry. It will just be an idyllic existence of the self. I'm not going to explain any of this. You can. Took me a while to sort out what I wanted to say as opposed to all the different things I read. Taoism and Confucianism are both Chinese faiths. Heaven and hell are structured within Taoism the same as the imperial bureaucracy. Everything, Taoism and Confucianism are seen by many to be more secular than religious. The souls are judged and pay for their crimes by passing through various layers of hell to end in reincarnation. In Confucianism, there are 5 relationships that are the key to everything: ruler to subject, father to son, older brother to younger brother, husband to wife, friend to friend. If there is harmony in human affairs, there is harmony in heaven. Whatever is not our direct responsibility is the will of heaven. So it becomes a very ethical, secular kind of faith. Between them is Buddhism. Again, we have a very cyclical view of history and individual existence. Death is a transition through intermediate levels to rebirth in another earthly existence until you reach what's called moksha, M-O-K-S-A, which is the experience of liberation, nirvana, full enlightenment. Within Buddhism, there are 8 hot hells below earth, with different sufferings, with 16 minor hells. There are 6 heavens of sensual realms of kings and gods, 2 other heavens, the world of the mind and of consciousness, with various qualifications to be in them. You have to go through all these different levels to finally reach nirvana, which releases you from reincarnation. All right, going to skip Christianity for a second, go to Islam. Perfect judgment is an attribute of God and will be disclosed at the last judgment using what's on record of every individual's deeds in life. So you will be judged by what you did in this life. You go across a bridge. True believers can cross the bridge, but what are called infidels, non-believers, fall off the bridge into a pit of hell. And the sufferings there are unending. Heaven and hell, each with 7 regions. The 8th region of heaven is for the blessed only. There is a kind of purgatory that allows for restitution within Islam. The last one in that column is Sikhism, which goes back to the 1500s. Yes. Started with Guru Nanak. The final guru was Gobind Singh in 1675. And it teaches you to abandon egotism to find union with God. They're very universalist. They're not an evangelistic religion. They believe that everybody has the right to their own religion, and it's one of non-interference with them. Now we go back to Christianity. Heaven is the fulfilling state of bliss, the home of God. Hell is the destiny of the cursed, of unending punishment. The Council of Florence in 1439 ratified the existence of purgatory. So we went 1400 years within the Catholic Church before they decided, well, maybe there is such a thing as purgatory and we ought to make it part of our laws within the Catholic Church. Origen in the 5th century, who was a great writer, we have a lot of his works, was one of the first to really push the notion of eternal punishment without escape. All right. Now that we know everything there is to know about world religions, we're going to go into what's called cosmology. Anybody know what that's all about?
No.
The teacher's supposed to stay one step ahead, not a whole football field. But
Study the stars, isn't it?
cosmology is the relationship out of myth and folklore of heaven and earth and hell. So if we look at, oh, come on, there we are. This is, if you take what's in the Bible, this is what you get as a cosmology of the whole thing. We have the dome of the heavens. We have what's called a cosmic mountain, and that's your faith journey to reach the dome of the heavens, which is where God resides. Then you have the underworld, and this vision of a bottomless sea underneath the whole thing. Now, there are other diagrams of this. I'm going to show you a couple more. This is a better graphic, I guess. You have heaven, the dwelling place of God. Remember, we talk about in Genesis about the firmament in heaven and the firmament, the division of the firmament, the clouds in the sky and the water on the earth. So you have the vault of heaven, You have the pillars that hold up the heavens, the stars. You have earth, and then the pillars of earth that hold up the earth above Sheol, and then this notion of this abyss of waters around the whole thing. Now, if you think of the world standing on, we'll say, a vast plain or plateau, and you're a child, what's going to be your vision of the universe? It's going to be like this, that the earth is flat, and you have this vault of the sky above everything, and there's got to be something holding it all up. Does that make sense? In a non-scientific perception of the universe, in a way, this is what you get. And when you infuse it with the notion of God and a heaven and a hell, of course, heaven is going to be above because that's where God is, and hell is going to be below us because we walk all over it. Any question? I expected everybody to jump right in here. Here are a couple more. The one on the right is the Norse mythology about the different levels of heaven and hell. The one on the left is again another version of a Christian and most other faiths' perceptions of the way things look. Now it gets even more complicated when we look at things like this, where you have the yin and the yang. On the right, the middle are the 31 planes of existence within, I believe that's Hindu. Can't see it well enough. And then you've got Jainism on the right, with all the different levels of heaven and hell. Where did we get all this from? Where'd it come from? Where did all these ideas? Okay. We have been, for millennium, been trying to sort out our individual existence, and we do it through myth, we do it through stories, and we do it through our visual perception. Almost every primitive religion, almost every primitive culture has some form of cosmology, some form of the layers of heaven, earth, and hell. They may not use those exact terms, but even going back to Neanderthals, who buried their dead ritually, we always thought they were just big dumb brutes, but we have excavated archaeologically and determined anthropologically that the dead were buried ritualistically.
Hello.
The bodies were painted, and they were left with funeral implements, pots, weapons, jewelry, things of importance. If you don't have a vision of something to come after, why leave the dead with anything? Does that make sense? Look at what the Egyptians left their kings with. In China, they're still looking for the tombs of like Genghis Khan and the first emperor of China. You've probably seen pictures, and maybe you went down to the Franklin Institute to see the terracotta warriors. These hundreds and thousands of sculptures in this vast area, but they have not yet opened the tomb of the emperor for whom all of that was built. There's a certain sacred nature, and there's a mythology about what they're going to find once they get in there. Seems to me, I remember there's something about lethal gases and everything in there, but irrelevant of that. It is sacred territory that they don't want to yet disturb. Will they at some point? I think they probably will. We're still uncovering tombs and burial places all around the world of primitive cultures and trying to discern what their theology might have been depending on what's found in the tomb or the burial site. Comments? Questions? Am I leading us all astray? Or, now we can go back to those original questions with all of this. What's your vision of heaven and hell? How does it fit into all of these different views of cosmology and layers? And, is there one heaven or are there 14? Is there one hell or are there 93? So much of our present day Christian understanding of both is based on Dante's Divine Comedy, which, if you didn't know, there are 3 books to the Divine Comedy. There's the Inferno, Purgatory, and Paradise. And if you want to read, I've got a copy of each of them back there. Good luck. Written in the 15th century. And that has, in fact, colored our view of heaven and hell ever since. Has it determined theology? I don't know that it's determined any theology, but it certainly has colored our individual view of that. Questions?
Human beings have a need to know, and don't know, they imagine.
Right. Said human beings have a need to know, and when they don't know, they imagine it. And I think, who here's been to heaven? Raise your hand. Tell us what it was like.
Right.
Who's been to hell and back? There are people who would say the circumstances that they were in at individual times were a living hell, but that's not a quote unquote physical existence after death.
When you read with people with near life experiences,
Yeah, the book.
who experience, they don't want to come back
Right.
a while because whatever they were experiencing, and they're all different views. Some actually said, like Jane saw people.
Right.
There was one where the boy's grandfather didn't have glasses because he was young. I forget what book I
Right.
read in that.
Yeah. And that's what she's saying is that,
Those books, yeah.
near-death experience and
Mhm.
people whose heart have stopped and they've brought them back. They talk about the light and the peace that was involved. And I remember an issue of the Golden Girls. Remember, she got to go back and see her late husband. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't have an answer for that. artists have tried to interpret it, and that's what we're going to look at next, because we're supposed to be doing faith and art. So, um, so
Go ahead, Deacon.
this, does anybody know what this is?
The gates of hell.
It's The Gates of Hell by Rodin. You can go down in Philly. You don't have to go in the museum to see it. It's on the outside wall. Has over 200 figures in it. He worked on it for a long time. He pulled figures off. He added figures. He changed figures. And you really have to stand there and examine it and look at it. It can be rather terrifying. His vision. I'm gonna zip through these.
What's the name of that? That's called
Gates of Hell.
Gates of Hell. Okay.
By Rodin, and it's right in Philadelphia. I don't know if that's the only version. If that's it.
I think there's other versions.
Yeah.
but
This is the Last Judgment in the Sistine Chapel by Michelangelo, and it's the 16th century view of heaven. You've got the heaven up here and you got the hell down here. And I don't know, I can't see it well enough. Let me see if I can find it on there. One of the figures down here in hell is Pope Julius, who commissioned it.
You put him in hell.
Yes, he did.
Yeah, the people that Michelangelo got upset with were depicted here.
Yeah, he did that repeatedly, but Julius kept changing his mind about so many different things. And I don't know whether he had died before it finished.
And Michelangelo relied heavily on Dante, correct?
Yes. Yep. Everybody seems to have. Now we go to these, which are, Hermanius Bosch.
I knew you'd have Bosch. didn't you?
Well, he's funny to some extent, and I should have brought the book. I've got a book of all of his stuff in it that you could look at. But it's just sort of, it's evil, but it's tongue in cheek at the same time. And it's kind of, you really have to look at it under a microscope to really see all the different images. I stuck the one down below to give it a little closer view.
What time frame is he from?
1500s. Yeah.
1500s.
Again, we're talking Renaissance,
Yep.
when just coming out of the medieval period where the church was all powerful. And, if you got excommunicated by the church, that was death.
Cut off.
And you were gone. Nobody would talk to you, nothing. And it was a period through the Renaissance and even into the 1700s when artists really promoted visions of hell more than heaven, because in heaven you just had visions of Jesus and Mary and God. But in hell, you could put your neighbors. You weren't sure if they made it to heaven. So,
Michelangelo put all his friends in the ceiling,
Right.
and all the people that he despised on the Last Judgment.
Well, it's true.
It's
All right.
Kinda
Now
funny.
these are some other medieval vision. Look at how crowded hell
I was
is.
gonna say, it's busy, look at it.
Um,
What'd you say? Pretty realistic.
yeah. Um,
Oh my gosh, it is busy.
Yeah, and I don't have the artist's name. I couldn't find it when I was just thumbing through. There are so many different paintings that, we could be here for hours and hours, but again, it's repetitious of the same theme. It's pain and suffering. everybody killing everybody else. You got a guy stabbing, spearing, and people trying to get out, but there's no way to get out. No place to go.
There's a
Um,
little door to paradise down in that lower left corner,
Yeah.
but it's like gated closed or something.
This is a modern interpretation. This is on this side an enlargement of this section over there. And this is another modern vision of hell. We're going to get to the better stuff, Shirley, so.
I'm like taking a nap. Right?
Okay. This is actually a Russian piece. All these skeletons and a train station.
It's done like oh my gosh, it's like a photograph.
Yes.
It's like
It's very realistic.
Very realistic. Probably what they
is
saw.
it actually
I don't know
I
whether
wonder if it's computer generated. So that's pretty
it's
recent.
new.
Very
It's
recent.
recent.
It's
Yes.
very almost computer generated or something. I
Could
don't know.
be. I'm not sure.
There's a pig's head over there.
All right, now we switch gears and we go up. Again, there are a lot of modern paintings of visions of heaven. Here you have angels in the form of praying hands. It reminds me, when I was in Seoul, Korea, at the time, this was 96, the tallest building in Seoul was 66 stories high. And the man who built it and had it designed was a staunch Christian. And the building is actually in the shape of praying hands.
How about that?
You get this outward turn at the bottom going up to a point at the top. Beautiful view from the top. Glass elevators all the way up. If you're afraid of heights, it's not the place to go. So that's sort of an ethereal, mystical kind of vision. Now we have this, I think, in some people's minds might be more like what we might encounter, although it's a little stormy sky. But you've got the escort, the angel escorting the individual. I don't know whether that's supposed to be the river Styx. If it is, we're in the wrong place. Here we've got the bridge. Remember we talked about the bridge in Islam? Bridge pops up in a lot of different imageries of heaven. We talk about the pearly gates. You know, you've got to make it through the pearly gates. If you don't make it through the pearly gates, you're done. This is sort of harkens back to Greek mythology, almost. But the light at the end, crossing the bridge. There's a man standing down in the bottom, looking up. This is very Nordic. If you saw the Fellowship of the Rings or the Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings, the movies, any of them, this is very reminiscent of that kind of imagery. Thomas Kinkade, who's a very popular painter, I think he just died a couple of years ago. There's been all kinds of disputes about his ownership.
I don't think I've ever seen any of this stuff in quite those colors. So many pinks and
He usually deals with landscapes.
yeah, I know. And they're the biggest nightmarish puzzles you've ever done. Because the colors are so close. and
Close.
Similar. Yeah.
Right. So here we have a vision of heaven.
Is there? Oh yeah, and there's the gate down to the left hand
Here's the
side.
gate with the
entry.
angel. Looks like he's buying a ticket.
It does look like a mailbox or something
Yeah,
down there,
I know.
doesn't it?
Looks like a jukebox.
Oh no, there's an angel sat behind it.
Yeah.
And look at all the people in
It's
the
a
below.
podium.
Like, see the lower corner. You can actually see a little clearer there. There's like
Yeah,
a
the people down here
lower
waiting,
corner.
waiting
Yeah.
to get in, waiting to get their ticket.
All the angels watching
And this
outside.
is like a cutout of what's inside. All right, now we switch.
I wonder what that is over on that side.
Looks like a field of angels. This is Gustave Doré, who did the most famous illustrations of Dante's Inferno, the Divine Comedy, all three books. I have a book that has just these prints in it. These, I don't have the reference to the exact quarto and verse. But a few from hell, and then we'll end with heaven. The devil. These were done in the 1800s. Probably the most famous paintings of the Inferno. And in Dante's Inferno, Dante is led by Virgil on this journey through hell, purgatory, and then to heaven. No, Virgil couldn't get there.
Yeah.
Virgil was a bad boy. But they met all kinds of people from history along the way. Now we're in heaven. The circle of angels. And then the angel cross. Now that's the last picture I've got, but I'm going to play a piece of music, probably one of the most famous operas dealing with heaven and hell was Gounod's Faust. And I'm going to play the very angels walk her into heaven. Questions? Comments? Oh, only took us an hour to get through heaven and hell. That's not bad.
I really like the thoughts of the near-death experience people who, you know, have almost died. Doctors have said that, and then they come back and their experience was all good. I like to think of that.
Yeah, I would, you know,
That's the closest anybody around here's come.
I think ultimately visions, especially of heaven, are extremely individualized. It is what you want it to be in order to be comfortable with your own death. A friend of mine who was a hospice nurse, very active member of the church, said that people who were on hospice care who had faith and believed in God died far more peacefully because they had a vision in their head of what was to come. Now, it might not be your vision or my vision, but it's what makes them the most comforted. Years ago, I was a Vista volunteer in teaching an adult Sunday school class. I'm just out of college, but, and I asked, the question, what is hell? And one of the men answered, and it's been something that has stayed with me ever since. He said, hell is existing in an eternal void. Now, in a void, there is no light, there is no sound, there is nothing. And for him, hell was then living or existing, as it were, in that state of being.
Sounds like solitary confinement.
Yep, go ahead.
Well, I helped out in hospice, and I remember I had left a patient, and the nurse was in there later, 2 minutes, and the patient said, "I've got to go now. Someone's coming for me." So I thought that was
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Questions? All right. I'm not going to pass this out. Well, maybe I will. I want us to end on a humorous note, if that's possible. All right. Oh, I'm going to read
Do you want me
it.
to pass that?
Yeah.
I can pass it to you.
This is something that's been around on the internet for a long time. I believe it, unlike some of the things you find on the internet, that it's probably true. What's going on here that I'm not able to click on? This was an actual question given on a University of Washington chemistry midterm exam. And this was the question: is hell exothermic, gives off heat, or endothermic, absorbs heat? And then you're supposed to support your answer with a proof. No, I couldn't answer that one way or the other. But it says most of the students wrote proofs of their belief using Boyle's law that gas cools off when it expands and heats up when it is compressed. One student, however, wrote this: first, we need to know how the mass of hell is changing in time. So we need to know the rate that souls are moving into hell and the rate they are leaving. I think that we can safely assume that once a soul gets to hell, it will never leave. Therefore, no souls are leaving. As for how many souls are entering hell, let's look at the different religions that exist in the world today. Some of these religions state that if you are not a member of their religion, you will go to hell. Since there are more than one of these religions, and since people do not belong to more than one religion, we can project that all people and all souls go to hell. With birth and death rates as they are, we can expect the number of souls in hell to increase exponentially. Now we look at the rate of change of the volume of hell, because Boyle's law states that in order for the temperature and pressure in hell to stay the same, the volume of hell has to expand as souls are added. This gives two possibilities. If hell is expanding at a slower rate than the rate at which souls enter, then the temperature and pressure in hell will increase until all hell breaks loose. Of course, if hell is expanding at a rate faster than the increase of souls in hell, then the temperature and pressure will drop until hell freezes over. So which is it? If we accept the postulate given to me by Ms. Therese Banyan during my freshman year, that it will be a cold day in hell before I sleep with you, and take into account the fact that I have not succeeded in having sexual relations with her, then two cannot be true, and thus I am sure that hell is exothermic. And he got an A. I've always thought that was just one of the cleverest things around. Anybody have any other questions or anything to bring before us? next month, we're going to look at stained glass. We're going to go through and photograph all of the windows in the church and put them on slides. And there is a booklet, but the booklet's in black and white. And so it really doesn't give you any depth. But we'll go through when the church was designed and the stained glass windows were designed, what the meanings of all of the different windows are. And they may not be what you think. We'll also look at the history of stained glass, which goes back to Roman days and beyond, even in Egyptian glass. But why glass was used in churches and colored glass. And then in the Reformation, the Protestants removed all the stained glass because they said that was idolatrous. It was not worshiping God, it was worshiping something else. And so we'll do that next month.
Are we meeting down here? or
Yes, no,
upstairs?
we're not going to meet in the sanctuary because then we'd have to move around all over the place to look at the different. It's easier to photograph them and project
Could
them
you
up
not
here.
find any of the books that were in color?
The
None of
only
them
thing
were
that's in
made-
color is the cover,
There were none made in
They
color.
were not produced
They're
in color.
black and white.
except the cover.
And I think
There's
they're
nothing up
actually
in
more,
your office or anything
Look at me.
like that?
the ones that were made in black and white. They were never made in color. And I
So did
actually
they see
think
them in
they're.
color?
I think actually,
No.
if you look at them close, I think they're actually
No, I do
sketches.
not
I
have
think they're
one
not
color in
actually.
my
The windows.
I don't even actually know if
Hmm.
they're.
I've
actually
got a copy
photographs,
at home.
isn't it?
I'll check it out. But it would be nice, given the photographs, if we could reproduce that booklet as a welcome wagon kind of thing for people who come to the church or who visit, who might be interested in what the different windows mean. Because they all have very specific meanings.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then May, we're going to do with spirituality, and there's going to be no slides. It's going to be a quote unquote touchy feely kind of thing. We're not going to. You hear this all the time. No smells and bells, but like you would find in an Orthodox church necessarily, but something else to help us to try to understand what it means to have faith outside of worship and outside the structure of worship, and how it'll be very much a my point of view kind of session, how we can move forward in a different perception of what spirituality and a sense of communion with God is all about.